Maria stood in front of the mirror, the morning light casting a soft glow on her weathered face. Her hands rested on the porcelain sink, fingers trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had passed. She tilted her head gently to the side, examining the faint ridge that ran down her left cheek, a delicate scar, barely visible now, except to those who knew to look for it. Once, that side of her face had been unrecognizable. Once she couldn't even bring herself to look in a mirror without turning away in shame or sorrow. But now, she looked, and she smiled. It was not a perfect smile. It tugged more easily on one side than the other, revealing the stubborn aftermath of surgery and time. But it was hers, hard-earned, paid for in pain, patience, and prayer. She reached into the small wooden box on the shelf above the sink and pulled out a silver cross, old, a bit tarnished, but polished carefully at the edges. Her mother's. She held it gently between her fingers, then closed her eyes. The whisper that escaped her lips was nearly soundless. Thank you. For years, Maria had felt as if the world had forgotten her, or worse, looked at her and recoiled. She had been a woman with a growing shadow on her face, ignored by doctors, pitied by strangers, hidden from cameras and from herself. Her daughter couldn't look at her. She couldn't look at herself. But this morning was different. Outside, a cardinal sang softly from a tree just beyond the window. Maria smiled again, wider this time. The mirror reflected not just her face, but her journey. Some people believe scars are ugly, that they mar beauty, that they should be hidden. Maria had believed that too once, but not anymore. Every scar tells a story, and this one, the one that changed everything, had been more than skin deep. It had reached her soul, her faith, her will to live, and somehow she had survived. This is the story of that scar, of the silence that allowed it to grow, the faith that held her when no one else did, the daughter she almost lost, the breath she almost didn't take. It is the story of a woman who lost her face and found her life. Maria had always been a woman of quiet strength. In the small town of Easton, Pennsylvania, she was known as the woman with the kind eyes and the best pot roast in the county. She ran the morning shift at Della's Diner, a family-run place where she had worked since she was 20. Now, at 36, she moved with the easy rhythm of someone who had mastered the art of serving with both efficiency and warmth. Her daughter, Sophie, 13 going on 30, would sometimes wait for her after school in the back booth, headphones in, sketching quietly as Maria filled coffee cups and plates with practiced grace. It was on a rainy Thursday in March when Maria first noticed the lump. She was tying her hair back before her shift, and as her fingers brushed just below her left ear, there it was, a small, hard knot beneath the skin. It didn't hurt, not really, just a strange sensation, like something out of place. She pressed on it gently, watching her reflection. It was nothing, she thought. Probably a swollen gland. She'd been feeling under the weather lately, a lingering sinus issue, some fatigue, nothing to worry about. She took a couple of ibuprofen and went to work. The days passed and the lump remained. 2 weeks later, it was still there. Maria mentioned it offhandedly to her mother one morning over coffee. You should have it checked, her mother said, setting down her teacup with a frown. You're not young anymore. Maria smiled. Gee, thanks, Ma. I'm just saying, you're the only one Sophie has. Don't wait around on things like this. So she went to the local clinic. Dr. Newcomb, a man she'd seen only a few times before, examined her with the casual briskness of someone who had too many patients and not enough time. Could be a lymph node, he said, poking the area briefly. Might be an infection. Do you have a fever? No. Any pain? Not really. Just pressure, I guess. He leaned back in his chair, already typing. Let's start with antibiotics. Amoxicillin. Twice a day for 10 days. If it doesn't go down, come back. Maria nodded. She didn't ask for further tests. Didn't insist. She didn't want to be one of those patients. The ones who questioned everything, made scenes, demanded specialists. Besides, it was probably nothing. But the lump didn't go away. By late April, it had grown, just slightly, but enough for her to notice it in the mirror if she turned her head a certain way. She began wearing her hair down more often. Then came the scarves. Chic, one of her co-workers joked as Maria tied a floral print around her neck. Maria laughed. but there was a tightness behind it. She didn't tell anyone that she was starting to avoid looking in the mirror altogether. She thought of going back to Dr. Newcomb, but work was busy, and Sophie had a school trip coming up, and the deductible on her insurance had just reset. Money was always tight, always. She whispered a short prayer before bed each night, rubbing a dab of menthol on her neck, hoping it would go down on its own. By June, the lump was unmistakable. Sophie noticed first. One morning, as Maria leaned over to tie her daughter's shoelace before school, the girl recoiled slightly. "Mom, what's wrong with your face?" Maria froze. Her hand hovered midair. "It's nothing," she said, her voice too quick. "Just a little bump." Sophie frowned. "It looks bigger than before." Maria smiled and stood. "I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry." But she wasn't fine. Not anymore. That night, she went to the mirror in the hallway. For the first time in weeks, she turned her head fully to the side and looked. The skin around the lump was starting to pull slightly. The line of her jaw wasn't quite even anymore. Her cheekbones seemed higher on one side. She traced the curve of the swelling with her fingers. "God, what is this?" she thought. "What are you trying to tell me?" She opened the drawer beside her bed and took out the small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in a soft cloth, was her mother's old silver cross, the one she had worn every day until the end. Maria hadn't put it on in years, but tonight she did. She clutched it in her hand and whispered the same prayer she had whispered as a girl. "Protect me, help me, show me what to do." The cross was cold against her skin. The scarves became a routine. At first, Maria wore them out of modesty, practicality. After all, fall was coming, and the Pennsylvania air was cooling. But by October, she was rarely seen without one. Floral patterns, solid blues, soft cashmeres on good days, synthetic blends on others. She had a whole drawer full of them now, each one carefully folded like armor. The lump had grown slowly but unmistakably. It wasn't just under her ear anymore. It stretched forward, pushing along her jawline, creating a visible contour even beneath fabric. Her once smooth face now bore an uneven shape, a rise where there used to be symmetry. In the mirror, she saw someone she didn't know. She stopped wearing makeup. She stopped taking photos. She declined dinner invitations and skipped church potlucks. Her world shrank from the warm buzz of diner regulars and school meetings to the quiet corners of her kitchen and bedroom. Even at work, she found herself keeping her head down more. She cleaned tables instead of taking orders, busied herself with dishes in the back when she used to greet customers by name. People noticed. They didn't say it outright, at least not most of them. But she caught the stares, the slightly longer glances, the hurried double takes before someone smiled too widely to compensate. One child, maybe 6 or 7, pointed at her one morning in line at the grocery store and whispered to his mother, "Is that lady sick?" The mother tugged him away and offered Maria a stiff smile. Maria smiled back, or tried to, but her lips were already beginning to pull unevenly. That night she didn't eat dinner. She just sat in the living room with the TV on low, absently fingering the edge of the scarf around her neck. Sophie was upstairs doing homework, or maybe on her phone. Maria couldn't be sure. Their conversations had become shorter, peppered with more silence than they used to. Sophie had begun spending more time at her friend Ava's house. On weekends, she asked to sleep over. Maria knew what that meant, even if Sophie didn't say it. One evening, she knocked gently on her daughter's bedroom door. Sophie was scrolling through something, earbuds in. Maria gestured toward her own neck. "Does it bother you?" Sophie looked up, blinking, caught off guard. "What? This?" Maria touched the edge of her scarf. "Me, looking like this?" Sophie hesitated just a second too long. "I didn't say that, I know you didn't. But I can feel it." Sophie looked away. "It's just weird, okay? People stare." Maria nodded slowly. "Yeah, they do." The words sat heavy between them. "I'll go to the doctor again," Maria said. "Soon." Sophie didn't answer. Later that week, Maria sat at the edge of her bed, holding a framed photo of the two of them from when Sophie was 9. They were at the beach, both wearing floppy hats and beaming. Maria remembered feeling beautiful that day. She remembered Sophie grabbing her hand and laughing, shouting over the waves. She looked so different then. Youthful, strong, whole. Now she avoided mirrors, and photos, and sometimes even her own daughter. She made an appointment. Back at Dr. Newcomb's office, the nurse took her blood, pressure and weight, before leaving her alone in the pale exam room. A poster of the human lymphatic system hung on the wall. She stared at it, at the bright green lines and unfamiliar Latin terms. When Dr. Newcomb entered, he greeted her with the same practiced friendliness as before. "You're back," he said, scanning her chart. "It's been, what, almost a year?" "Yes," Maria said. "The lump's bigger. It hasn't gone away." He glanced up, and for the first time she saw a flicker of concern on his face. "Let's take a look." She pulled down her scarf. He pressed gently around the mass, now pushing forward under her ear and along her jaw. "Still no pain?" "Sometimes. Aching, mostly. And tingling. My cheek feels numb sometimes." He frowned. "Any weight loss? Night sweats?" "No." He leaned back, silent for a moment. "I'll renew your antibiotics," he said. "But this time, I think we should schedule a follow-up in a few months. If it's still growing, we may consider imaging." Maria blinked. "Months?" He shrugged. "It could still be benign. These things can plateau. No need to jump to conclusions," she wanted to protest. To demand a scan. But the words caught in her throat. "All right," she said softly. She paid the copay with a tight jaw and walked out into the cold wind, scarf fluttering behind her. That evening, as she folded laundry, Sophie walked into the room. "Well?" the girl asked. Maria didn't look up. "He gave me another prescription." Sophie sighed. "So, nothing?" Maria shrugged. "It's not urgent." Her daughter's expression twisted. "It looks urgent to me," Maria snapped, more from exhaustion than anger. "Do you think I don't see that? Do you think I don't know what I look like?" Sophie's mouth opened, then closed. She left the room without a word. Maria sat back on the bed, eyes burning. She reached for the nightstand and opened the drawer. The cross was there just where she'd left it. She pressed it to her chest. "Why won't they listen?" she whispered. "Why does no one care?" The cross was silent. 3 months passed. The lump didn't go away. It grew, gradually but undeniably. Maria could feel it every time she lay down, a pressure against her throat, like something lodged beneath the skin that didn't belong. Her jaw ached in the mornings, and at night, a dull throb would settle behind her ear like a drumbeat she couldn't silence. Still, she didn't go back to the doctor, not right away. Her insurance had changed. Again. The diner had cut back hours, and with fewer hours came fewer benefits. She now qualified only for catastrophic coverage, the kind that protected against major accidents, not creeping tumors or undiagnosed masses. The new policy had a deductible so high, Maria couldn't meet it unless she was hit by a truck, so she did what many people do when they can't afford to be sick. She worked, she prayed, and she pretended, but pretending was getting harder. Her speech was beginning to slur slightly on the left side. When she laughed, her mouth didn't quite follow. She started declining phone calls and avoiding friends. Even Sophie had stopped asking questions. It was late January when the real pain began. She had just finished a double shift, her cheeks flushed from the steam of the kitchen, her legs aching from hours on her feet. She bent down to pick up a dropped fork and felt a sharp, sudden jolt in her jaw, like a knife slicing through muscle. She dropped the fork, grabbed the side of her face. One of her coworkers, Rhonda, noticed. "You all right?" Maria nodded, forcing a smile that came out as a grimace. "Just tired." But it wasn't just that. It was getting worse. And fast. The next morning, she made another appointment with the clinic. Not with Dr. Newcomb this time. He was booked for weeks. They gave her a young physician assistant named Melanie, who looked no older than Sophie. Melanie was kind but uncertain. After a brief exam, she suggested Maria see a specialist. "You need imaging," she said. "This has gone on too long." Maria exhaled slowly, like she'd been waiting for someone to finally say it. "But I need to be honest with you," Melanie added. "Your insurance, it might not cover a CT, at least not without a referral and prior authorization. It could take a while." Maria stared at her. "How long?" Melanie shrugged, uncomfortable. "A few weeks, maybe more." "I've had this for over a year," Maria said quietly. "It's changing my face." "I know," Melanie said, "and I'm sorry. Let me do what I can." The clinic submitted the request. Maria waited. She waited 2 weeks. Then 3. During that time, the numbness in her cheek spread. Her left eyelid drooped slightly now. Swallowing became difficult, like there was always something caught in her throat. She avoided solid foods, lost weight, lost sleep. She called the clinic. They were still waiting on authorization. One day, while standing in the shower, warm water cascading over her shoulders, Maria felt something new, A pulse, not her heartbeat, something inside the lump itself, a throbbing, slow and sinister, like the thing growing in her face had a life of its own. She sank to the floor, let the water beat down on her, and cried. The next morning she called Melanie directly. "I need help," she said. "Please." Melanie managed to expedite a referral, but not locally. The only available ENT who would accept Maria's insurance was in Philadelphia, nearly 2 hours away. Maria borrowed her coworker's car and made the drive alone. The specialist, Dr. Kapoor, was efficient and no-nonsense. He asked questions, examined her face carefully, and sent her for a stat CT scan that afternoon. When she returned to his office, he sat her down. "It's a parotid tumor," he said, "originating in the salivary gland growing along your facial nerve." Maria nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "Is it cancer?" she asked. "I don't know yet. We'll need a biopsy, but regardless it has to come out. Soon." Her chest tightened. "I've had this for over a year," she said. "Everyone said it was nothing." Dr. Kapoor sighed, not unkindly. "Unfortunately, these tumors are often misdiagnosed early, especially in women." Maria blinked. "In women?" He nodded. "Pain is downplayed. Symptoms dismissed. It's a systemic issue." She looked away. Her throat burned. "How much is the surgery?" she asked. He paused. "With your coverage, maybe around 10 to 12,000 out of pocket." She didn't cry in the office. She nodded, shook his hand, scheduled the surgery, and walked out into the cold wind. But when she got into the car, she broke. She clutched the steering wheel, forehead resting against her arms, and let the sobs come for the money she didn't have. For the years she'd waited, for the face that no longer felt like hers. She drove home in silence. That night she opened her Bible for the first time in weeks. It fell open to a verse she didn't remember marking. "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. She stared at the words. Weakness, power, grace. She touched her cheek, then the cross around her neck. "Is this what you meant?" she whispered. "Is this how you're showing up?" Outside, snow began to fall. The word tumor echoed in Maria's mind long after she left Dr. Kapoor's office. She said it to herself that night in a whisper, almost experimentally, like speaking it aloud might help her understand it better. Tumor, a thing that had been growing inside her while life marched on. Shift after shift at the diner, PTA meetings, grocery runs, forgotten birthdays. Now it had a name. The CT scan had shown a mass almost 5 centimeters in diameter, tracing the contour of her left jaw and curling dangerously close to her carotid artery. Dr. Kapoor had drawn it on a notepad, a bulbous shadow snaking through muscle and nerve. "A parotid tumor," he explained. "Not immediately cancerous, but not harmless either. Its size and location made it urgent. There was no question. It had to be removed." Maria nodded through all of it. She didn't cry in front of him. She didn't scream. She just sat still, palms flat against her thighs, absorbing the shape of her reality like it was a math problem. "What happens if I don't do the surgery?" she asked. He looked at her, unflinching. "You will lose function of the left side of your face. Swallowing will become difficult, then breathing. Eventually, it will press against your airway." Maria nodded again. "What are the risks if I do it?" "Facial paralysis, partial or complete, bleeding, damage to the auditory nerve, and, of course, complications from anesthesia. And, if I can't pay..." He paused. "We can apply for hardship reduction through the hospital, but, yes, you'd need to come up with the down payment first. How much? At least $9,000 before we can schedule." Maria's stomach sank. That was nearly half a year's rent, more than she made in 3 months. "Can I have some time to figure it out?" "You don't have much time," he said gently. "I'm putting in the surgical request now, but I won't lie to you, this system moves slowly, especially when insurance pushes back. You'll need to be persistent." Maria didn't answer. She just nodded and left. The drive home was quiet. She watched the gray trees blur past the window like ghosts. It had started to snow again. When she got home, Sophie was sitting at the table, scrolling her phone, earbuds in. Maria didn't speak at first. She just sat across from her, folded her hands, and waited. Sophie looked up. "How did it go?" "It's a tumor," Maria said. Sophie froze. "Like cancer. They don't know yet. But they need to take it out." Sophie took out one earbud. "When?" "They said as soon as possible. But we can't schedule it until we pay the hospital." Sophie blinked. "What?" "I need $9,000. Sophie stared at her. But we don't have that. Maria smiled sadly. No, we don't. Sophie looked down. So what now? I guess, Maria said quietly. I wait. And I pray. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Maria called the hospital billing office, then the surgery scheduler, then her insurance. Over and over. Every time she was bounced between departments, asked for codes, reauthorizations, verifications. At one point, someone told her she had to resubmit her income documents. Another time, she was told her file was in review. She lost hours from work. Her phone battery died more than once from being on hold. One afternoon, after her 4th call of the day, Maria sat in the break room at the diner, her face in her hands. Rhonda walked in with 2 plates of pie. Bad day? She asked gently. Maria laughed bitterly. I'm being strangled by red tape. Rhonda sat beside her and nudged a plate toward her. Eat something. I'm not hungry. Rhonda didn't move the plate. Maria looked at her. I have a tumor growing in my face. They know what it is. They know it's getting worse. But they won't do anything until I give them money I don't have. Rhonda was quiet for a moment, then said, That's America. By the 4th week, Maria started choking. Not dramatically, not like in movies, just little catches in her throat. A dry tickle that wouldn't go away. She avoided bread, then meat, then even soup. Swallowing became an event, something to concentrate on. Her weight dropped, her energy dipped. Some mornings she stood in the shower too long, leaning against the wall, her arms trembling with the effort of simply being vertical. And still, no surgery. She started selling things, jewelry she hadn't worn in years, a spare TV, her mother's old china set. She pawned her wedding ring, the one she'd never really been able to look at anyway. Sophie offered to quit school events and get a part-time job. Maria refused. You're a child, she said. Your only job is to live your life. One night, Maria woke gasping for air. She had been asleep, dreaming of nothing, and then suddenly, awake, heart pounding, throat tight. Her fingers clawed at the scarf around her neck. She stumbled to the bathroom, flipped on the light, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her face was distorted, not in a way anyone else might have seen, but to her, it was undeniable. She was disappearing. She pressed both hands against the sink and whispered, I don't know what else you want from me. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to God or herself. The next day she called the hospital again. Her voice cracked when she said her name. I just need to know, she said. Am I dying while you wait for a computer to say yes? That got her transferred to a nurse navigator, a woman named Trish. Trish had a warm voice. She promised to look into it, promised to call back, and she did. We got partial approval, she said 2 days later, enough to schedule. The rest, we'll work out. Maria didn't even realize she was crying until she hung up the phone. She was scheduled for surgery in 3 weeks. But 3 weeks was still an eternity when something inside you was trying to kill you. In that time, her symptoms worsened. The throbbing in her jaw was now constant, her speech slurred. People began asking if she'd had a stroke. Her left eyelid sagged more than before, and her left ear buzzed all the time now, like a wasp was trapped inside. But she held on. Sophie counted down the days with her. 18 more, she'd say in the morning. Just 2 weeks now. Maria tried to believe it was coming, that she wouldn't be delayed again, that she wouldn't be forgotten. She spent her nights reading from her mother's Bible, underlining verses she didn't fully understand, but hoped one day to feel. She wrote a letter to Sophie, just in case. Folded it and placed it in her nightstand. She told herself it was silly, but she didn't throw it away. The night before the surgery, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake in the dark, listening to the wind outside, the creaks of the old house, Sophie's soft breathing in the next room. She got up once, went to the bathroom, looked at herself one last time. She touched the lump, the thing that had stolen her face, her confidence, her months of living. Then she whispered, I'm ready, not to die, to fight. The hospital was bright and cold and smelled faintly of antiseptic and wet floor cleaner. Maria stood at the front desk of the surgical admissions department, her paperwork clutched in shaking hands. Sophie stood beside her, silent but close, her hand occasionally brushing against Maria's elbow, as if to anchor her. The check-in nurse was brisk, friendly in a way that felt rehearsed. All right, you're scheduled for 7:30 a.m. with Dr. Kapoor. You'll be taken back shortly to prep. Is there someone here with you? Maria nodded. My daughter. She can wait in the family area. Once the surgery begins, we'll give you updates. Maria looked at Sophie. who nodded without speaking. Her eyes were glassy. "Can I see her before I go in?" Sophie asked. The nurse hesitated. "Depends on how fast prep goes. We'll try." A cold pit opened in Maria's stomach. Within 30 minutes, she was changed into a pale blue hospital gown and wheeled into a room with bright lights and machines she didn't recognize. A young nurse with red hair asked a series of questions: name, date of birth, allergies. Then came the oxygen monitor, the cold sticky pads placed on her chest for the EKG. Maria answered everything automatically. She was no longer a person, she was a chart, a code, a risk. An anesthesiologist came in and explained what would happen. She nodded, only half hearing him. The door opened again. This time, it was Sophie. 2 minutes, the nurse said. Sophie rushed to her side, took her hand. "Mom." Maria smiled weakly. "I'm okay. You don't look okay." They both laughed, a quiet, tearful sound. Sophie leaned in. "Please come back." Maria nodded. "I will." But in her heart, she didn't know. The surgical team surrounded her like dancers in a silent ballet. Dr. Kapoor greeted her with a nod. "Maria, we're going to take good care of you." She nodded. As they moved her into the operating theater, Maria stared at the ceiling tiles. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the gurney. Someone adjusted her fourth. Another nurse whispered something she didn't catch. And then, the mask. "Breathe in slowly." She did. The world tilted and went dark. Somewhere far away, Maria heard beeping. Not the loud, aggressive kind, softer, like music behind a wall. She tried to speak, but no sound came. She wasn't in her body anymore. She was floating, light, free. The room around her faded into something else, a field, golden, endless. There was wind, soft and warm, and the scent of wildflowers. She was barefoot, standing in grass up to her knees. The sky above her was impossibly wide. And then, she saw her mother, standing a few yards away, dressed in the pale yellow cardigan she used to wear when they gardened together. Her hair was short again, like it had been before the chemo. Her eyes were kind. Maria started to walk toward her. "Is it time?" she asked, though her mouth didn't move. Her mother shook her head gently. "Not yet. I'm tired. I know. I don't want to go back." Her mother smiled. "But you must." "Why?" "Because Sophie's not done needing you. And you're not done living," Maria cried. Her mother stepped forward and held her face in both hands. "Do you trust him?" Maria nodded, barely. "Then go." She woke to pain. Sharp, searing pain down her neck and jaw. A dull pressure in her throat. A pounding in her ears. And voices. "She's waking up. Maria, can you hear me?" A nurse, soft, urgent. Maria blinked, light stabbing into her eyes. "Don't try to talk," the nurse said. "Just squeeze my hand if you can hear me." Maria's fingers twitched. The nurse smiled. "You're okay. You're back." Hours passed in a haze. She drifted in and out, aware only of the foredrip, the pulse monitor, the heavy bandages wrapped around the left side of her face. It was nearly evening when she opened her eyes again to see Sophie sitting in a chair beside her, legs curled under her, eyes swollen. "Hey," Sophie whispered. Maria tried to speak. Nothing came out. "Don't," Sophie said. "Just rest." Maria blinked slowly. Then, very gently, she lifted her hand and pointed to the side of her face. Sophie understood. She helped her sit up slightly, careful not to disturb the bandages. Maria reached for the small mirror on the tray. Sophie hesitated but handed it to her. What she saw made her breath catch. Her face was swollen, bruised. Stitches ran along her jaw, hidden beneath surgical tape. One eye looked smaller than the other. Her smile, when she tried, curved awkwardly, unbalanced. She looked broken. She turned away. Sophie caught her hand. "You're beautiful." Maria shook her head, tears spilling silently. Sophie leaned in and whispered, "You came back. That's all that matters." The next morning, Dr. Kapoor came in. "The tumor's out," he said, checking her vitals. "All of it. You did well." Maria nodded slowly. "There was a moment," he said carefully, "about 4 hours in. Your heart rate dropped, significantly. We had to intervene." Maria stared at him. "You mean, I died?" "Briefly," he said, "but you came back." She lay in silence for a moment, then whispered, "Hoarse, I saw her." He didn't ask who. He just smiled, touched her shoulder and said, "Some people come back with stories. Some come back with silence. Either way, It means something. And 3 days later, Maria sat in a wheelchair by the window, watching snow fall. Her body hurt. Her throat burned. Her face didn't feel like her own. But she was alive. Sophie came in with tea and crackers. They sat quietly for a while. Finally, Maria asked, "Do I look that different?" Sophie thought for a moment. "You look like a warrior." Maria smiled, or tried to. Sophie reached into her bag and pulled something out, the silver cross. "I thought you might want this." Maria took it, fingers curling around the cool metal. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you. For breath. For pain. For the chance to come back." The first time Maria stood on her own after surgery, her legs buckled. A nurse caught her just before she collapsed, gently guiding her back onto the edge of the bed. "It's okay," the nurse said. "That's normal." Nothing felt normal. Her face was numb. Her mouth refused to move the way she wanted it to. Her throat ached. Her left eye teared constantly from nerve irritation. She slept in short bursts, waking to pain and confusion, tethered to monitors that beeped relentlessly. Even her dreams were fractured, blurred images of snow, mirrors, and fields of light. Still, she was alive. Each morning, the nurses helped her into a chair by the window. There, she watched the snow accumulate on the branches outside, watched visitors come and go through the parking lot below, watched the world she had almost left continue without her. Dr. Kapoor visited on the third day. "You're healing well," he said, scanning her chart. "The facial nerve was preserved. There's partial damage, but with therapy, you should regain some mobility." "Some," she croaked. He nodded. "We'll know more in a few weeks. You've already defied odds once. Let's see what else you can do." That afternoon, a speech therapist named Karen visited. They sat together in the therapy room, a quiet space with wide windows and a table covered in mirrors and flashcards. Karen held up a card, a smiling face. "Can you try this?" she asked gently. Maria stared at the image, then at her own reflection. The left side of her mouth didn't move. The right twitched slightly. Karen nodded. "That's okay." Again, it was exhausting, more than Maria expected. Not just the effort, but the humiliation of failure, of seeing herself struggle with something so small, so human. Karen handed her a mirror and said, "You're not just retraining muscles, you're retraining memory. Your brain thinks your face still works like before. We're teaching it the new way." Maria looked into the mirror, at the woman staring back, pale, scarred, tired, but alive. "I used to be pretty," she whispered. Karen's voice was soft. "You still are." Maria didn't answer, but she came back the next day, and the next, and Sophie visited every afternoon after school, dropping her backpack by the chair, peeling clementines, reading aloud from her textbooks, while Maria listened with her eyes closed. One day, Sophie pulled a folded piece of paper from her coat pocket. "I wrote this for English," she said, blushing. "We had to write about someone brave." Maria raised an eyebrow. Sophie hesitated, then began reading. "Bravery isn't always loud. It doesn't always carry a sword or stand on a stage. Sometimes bravery is quiet. It's waking up in a hospital room and trying to smile when half your face won't cooperate. It's selling everything you own because the system failed you. It's showing up for your child even when you feel like a stranger in your own skin. My mother is brave, not because she's perfect, but because she stayed. Even when it hurt, even when she wanted to disappear, she stayed." Maria wept silently as Sophie finished. She reached out and pulled her daughter into her arms. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Sophie smiled. "I'm proud of you." By the end of the second week, Maria could curl the corner of her mouth again. Just slightly, but it was something. Karen cheered when it happened. "That's progress. That's real." They celebrated with ice chips and soft piano music playing in the background. Maria still moved slowly, still tired easily, but she laughed more. Even if the laugh came out crooked, breathy, incomplete, she didn't care. Her smile, though misshapen, had returned. One morning she stood before the mirror in the therapy room and traced the line of her jaw. The swelling had gone down, the scar would take longer. She turned to Karen. "Do you think people will stare?" Karen shrugged. "Maybe." Maria nodded. "Okay," then she smiled. Not because someone asked her to, not because she was trying to perform, because she wanted to. Before her discharge, Dr. Kapoor came to check her one last time. "You've got a long road ahead," he said, "but you're already halfway down it. Maria smiled. It's not perfect. No, he said. But it's yours. She paused. Thank you. For everything. He looked at her for a long moment. You didn't just survive, Maria, he said. You chose to live. That night, Maria packed her things slowly. Sophie helped, folding clothes, collecting cards, zipping up the duffel. Maria held her mother's cross in her hand for a long time before putting it around her neck. Before they left, she looked at herself one more time in the mirror by the door. One side of her face bore the trace of battle, a faint line, a softness in the eye, but she was whole, and she was homebound. Maria had never intended to tell her story. She was a private person shaped by years of quiet service, to her job, to her family, to the God she still prayed to in the dark. But something changed after the surgery, not just on the outside, though her face bore the proof of what she'd endured, but deep within. It started with a blog post. Sophie had set up a small site for her as part of a school project. You don't have to publish anything, she told her, just write. Even if it's only for you. So Maria wrote. She wrote about waking up in recovery with her mouth too heavy to move, about the feeling of being trapped in a body that no longer recognized her, about the day she sold her wedding ring and how she never once looked back at it, about the night she dreamed of her mother standing in a golden field, and how real that vision still felt. She wrote it all, messy, raw, trembling. She posted it, and people found it. At first, a few comments, then dozens, then emails, other women, other mothers, people with scars inside and out, people who had been told by doctors that they were fine when they knew they weren't, people who had stared into mirrors and struggled to find their own reflection. Maria responded to each message, one by one. She didn't give advice. She didn't pretend to be a hero. She simply listened. It wasn't long before a local support group reached out and invited her to speak at a wellness conference for patients with rare or chronic facial conditions. Maria hesitated at first. She hadn't stood in front of a room full of strangers since her high school talent show, but Sophie convinced her. Mom, she said, you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be honest. So she said yes. The night before the event, Maria stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom practicing. Her reflection stared back, calm but uncertain. She wore a simple dress. A dark green scarf was wrapped loosely around her shoulders, not her neck. For the first time in 2 years, she wasn't covering the scar. She placed the silver cross over her collarbone and let it rest there, visible. Hi, she whispered. My name is Maria, and I lost my smile. But I found something else. She blinked. No, that sounds rehearsed. She tried again. My name is Maria. I was misdiagnosed, delayed, ignored, and nearly died because the system told me I didn't matter. Too angry. Again. My name is Maria, and I'm still here. Simple. True. She went to bed with that line in her mind. The room wasn't large, maybe 40 people, some in wheelchairs, some with visible scars, some with none at all. She stood behind the podium, palms damp, knees trembling. She looked out at the faces watching her, quiet, waiting. Then she began. She told them about the first day she felt the lump, about the doctor who dismissed her, about the months she spent swallowing fear like medicine, about the night she nearly choked in her sleep and thought she might die alone. She told them about waking up after surgery and seeing her daughter cry with joy. She told them about the mirror. The silence in the room deepened as she spoke, and then she said, I know we live in a world obsessed with appearances, and I know what it's like to feel erased, but I also know this: scars don't take away your beauty. They prove you survived. Someone sniffled in the back row. Maria smiled. It took me losing my face, she said, to finally stop hiding who I really am. The applause came slowly, then grew. Afterward, a young woman approached her, no older than Sophie. She wore a surgical mask and a hoodie pulled up tight. Her eyes were red. Thank you, she whispered. I haven't left my house in weeks. I thought I was the only one. Maria reached up and unclasped the chain around her neck. She pressed the silver cross into the girl's hand. You're not, she said. The girl blinked. Is this yours? It was my mother's. She gave it to me when I needed it most. Now I'm giving it to you. The girl clutched it to her chest and nodded. At night, Maria and Sophie sat at their kitchen table, eating soup and laughing over a spilled glass of juice. You were amazing, Sophie said. Maria shook her head. I was terrified. You didn't show it. Maria sipped her tea. I thought about not going, she admitted. Even up until the last second. Sophie leaned forward. Why did you? Maria looked at her daughter. Because if I had someone like me, years ago, maybe I wouldn't have waited so long. Maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone. Sophie reached across the table and took her hand. You're not alone anymore. Maria smiled, and this time it didn't feel crooked at all. Maria's kitchen looked different now, not because of new paint or furniture. Everything was still modest, worn in, filled with years of memory, but there was a new energy in the space, a kind of warmth that hadn't been there before, a kind of welcome. She had turned her kitchen into a classroom. Every Wednesday afternoon, 5 women gathered around her table, women in recovery, women in remission, women who had survived things with no names. They came to learn how to cook simple meals, yes, but they also came for something deeper: community, understanding, a place where no one stared too long at scars. Maria taught them how to make her signature roast chicken, how to fold dumplings, how to bake bread with their hands and not just their minds. Sometimes they shared their stories while stirring soup. Other times, they sat in silence and simply chopped onions, letting the tears fall for reasons that had nothing to do with vegetables. Sophie helped when she could. She'd grown taller, stronger. Her once awkward presence now carried grace. Maria watched her one afternoon, showing another woman how to measure yeast, and thought, this is what healing looks like. One day, a new woman joined the group. She wore a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck, her eyes wary, shoulders tense. Maria smiled and offered her a seat. There's always room at this table. The woman hesitated, then sat. As the others talked and worked, Maria moved quietly beside her. You don't have to share anything, she said softly. You just have to be here. The woman looked at her. Maria nodded once and reached up to gently touch the thin scar that traced her own jawline. I used to hide too, she said, but I realized something. Healing is not about returning to who we were. It's about learning to love who we are now. The woman's shoulders eased. Just a little. That night, after the kitchen had been cleaned and the house was quiet, Maria stood in front of the mirror one last time. She no longer flinched at her reflection. She no longer traced the outline of the scar or tilted her head to find the most flattering angle. She simply looked. Her face was hers, asymmetrical, softened by time, shaped by pain and perseverance. She smiled, and though the left side lifted slower than the right, though her lips didn't curve the way they used to, the smile was true, full, alive. She reached for her Bible on the nightstand and opened it. The pages were worn now, corners turned, notes scrawled in margins. Her eyes settled on a verse, one she had read many times before, but that tonight struck differently. He gives beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, and a garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. Isaiah 61:3. Maria closed the book and whispered, Thank you, for the pain that became purpose, for the silence that led to a voice, for the face she thought she had lost, and the life she gained instead. Then she turned off the light and let the darkness hold her gently. She was not afraid anymore. Some scars are meant to be hidden. Others are meant to be shared, because within them lies a story of survival, of strength, and of grace. Maria didn't just reclaim her smile. She rebuilt her life, one quiet act of courage at a time. And maybe, just maybe, her story is also a reflection of yours. So tell me, have you ever carried a scar, seen or unseen, that changed you forever? Share your story in the comments. Someone might need to hear it today. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because more real, human, healing stories are on the way. Stories that remind us we are never truly alone.